All right, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Tequila Tuesday. I think this is the 25th edition, 24th or 25th edition now of Tequila Tuesday. And really excited to talk with Collin Cadmus tonight. He and I, along with one or two others, have been, in my opinion, the most outspoken people in sales and in communities like LinkedIn, about stock options and equity and how there's so much gamesmanship and how things are rigged in favor of VCs and founders. And, we've tried to, I think, put the word out there to educate people, frontline people in particular, so you know what you're getting into and don't make mistakes and don't fully buy into a dream that has a low probability, but also that you understand there can be some nice wins and that it does make sense and it does work. We did I think it was a live webinar a little over a year ago. It was me and Collin with Richard Harris and Sam Jacobs. It's called Stock Option Straight Talk. I included the link a couple of times over the last few days. If you haven't got a chance to look at that, you should. There was a lot of people registered for that. It was promoted really hard. And it still gets views. Collin and I were talking just a few minutes ago that's still getting views and comments for both of us today. So we're going to talk a little bit about equity, a little bit about stock options. But as a reminder, this is your forum. This is for you all to bring forth questions to Collin. In particular, I'm happy to chime in as well. But, I want Collin to have this moment in this platform. You guys can talk to me whenever you want, but I'm happy to try to chime in as well and give some perspective. So if you don't know him, Collin Cadmus used to be the VP of sales at Aircall, amongst other places. Similar to me, grows things from 0 to 20 something million or whatever, and has run the gamut of what that's like as a VP as well. Collin and I have been communicating and talking for a number of years. We've been friends for a while now, and I'm excited to have him join us. And Collin, tell everybody a little bit about your background and kind of what you're up to right now.
Yeah, sure. Thanks again for having me. And hello, everybody. For those who I've never met before, hello, my name's Collin. As Scott said, I've been leading sales in similar ballparks as Scott, the SMB space, typically, 0 to 20, maybe upwards of 30 million ARR. I've done it 2 times. I helped build a sales team in my first company, actually. So I guess I'll backtrack to that. I spent the first 4 years of my career in retail, hated it, and then switched into, basically backtracked, went into an entry-level role in sales and worked my way up pretty quick. So I worked at a company called Single Platform in an entry-level role, just cranking out, a bunch of dials every day. Moved up to the head of sales training there in about 9 months. It was a company had just gotten acquired the month before I joined for 100 million. So it was very lucky timing in terms of just opportunity being put in front of me. So I took it very serious and climbed that ladder quickly. And then moved on to everything that Scott just said, being a VP of sales at Doctor.com and then Aircall. And so what leads us here today is everything Scott said. Equity is, for those who watched the YouTube video from last time, I think equity is something that is sold very heavily and very strongly. The dreams and all the glory of making lots and lots and lots of money is kind of the dream that's sold to us when we join startups. And it's often, depending on your role, it can often be something where they're sort of persuading you that this is an equivalent or an exchange for cash comp. And so there's lots of little things like that folks like Scott and I have learned the hard way, perhaps, or we've witnessed people learn the hard way. And that's what I think is going to be best for you guys to be able to learn today. Any questions that you have, anything you're unsure of, ask us. I don't know that we'll have all the questions, but we'll probably have a handful of them.
Yeah. So I'll kind of man the chat function as always. So drop your questions in there. You can private message me as well. If you have a question you want to ask anonymously, I'm happy to answer it, but I try to get a queue going here and give.
We got question number 1, Scott. It's not a White Claw, it's a Guru. I actually quit drinking, but organic energy is my new drug. So
there you go.
Who was that? That John Stern that said that? Yeah. Good to see you, John.
So let's start from the beginning. if you will, and because I don't know everybody's like baseline knowledge of this stuff. So maybe talk about the difference between options versus equity, because most people here would be getting options. Let everybody know what that's all about, and maybe we can talk a little bit about expectations in terms of how many shares somebody could expect by a particular role, what kind of time horizon should be expected, and what the payouts might be like. So what are options, what's equity, and what kind of expectations might people have?
Sure. Great place to start. It's funny. I just sent Scott a screenshot maybe a half hour ago. One of my friends from college sent me a message and he said, "Hey, I've got an interview coming up. They're trying to offer me a handful of equity in place of some comp." Basically, he's coming in above their budget and they're trying to negate that with some equity. And he said, "Do you have any content or anything I can watch?" Of course, I sent him the video from last year. But the question he asked is exactly what we're talking about here. What's the difference between equity and stock options? There is a difference. They're not just giving you a percentage of their company. That's essentially what equity is, right? If Scott said to me, "Hey, Collin, thanks for coming on tonight. You doubled my business. I want to give you 20% of my company as a thank you." We haven't pre-negotiated that yet, but we'll talk about it. But look, that would be straight equity, right? That would mean I own a percentage of his company. He just gave it to me. Usually when that scenario happens, it's someone's investing money in the company, right? They're buying that equity in the company. And so they actually have it. They actually own it. Options are quite different. So options they're giving you the option to buy those shares at a specific price, right? And that's usually an advantageous price that you maybe couldn't get if you were not an employee, particularly in the startup space. But so you do not own those options. You have the right to purchase them. And then there's a bunch of criteria that will follow along that, like when you can purchase them, what the price will be, what the tax implications will look like, et cetera. So I guess we'll dive into some of that stuff, but I'll try and go in order here. So that's the difference between equity and options, right? Options are you have the option to buy them, which when you think about that, it means you have to spend your own money to even take a chance at capitalizing on this. And that's not something that they advertise heavily, right? And that's a big, big, big detail. So think about that for a moment. Let's say that you are, let's say you're a VP of sales. So it's a meaningful amount of equity. Okay. And you go there, you get your stock options issued to you, and they're going to vest over the course of 4 years. So if you stay there for 4 years, you'll get the full amount of those options. Again, you have the right to purchase the full amount of options. They're not given to you. And so ideally, what you're hoping is, let's say those options were given to you at a strike price of $1. You're hoping that those are going to go up in value. And someday there'll be a liquidity event where you can actually sell them. Okay. So now you're a VP of sales, you're accruing this equity over time, it's vesting. Let's say you've been there 3 years and you leave the company. We use me as the example from Aircall, right? I left after 3 years. So I had 75% of my stock options were vested. That means I have the right to buy 75% of the options that were granted to me in the beginning. To do that, I have to pay the strike price that was on them. Now, here's a little trick that Scott actually warned me about, and I forgot, and I got slammed with it. If your shares have gone up in value from the time that they were granted to you to the time that you exercise them. So how would that happen? Well, Aircall, or my previous company, raised another round of funding after issuing those options to me. Obviously, the goal in any startups is to keep raising rounds of funding at higher valuations, make those stock options and equity worth more. And that happened. And so in order for me to exercise those shares, I learned, which I should have paid closer attention to Scott a year ago, that I actually have to pay tax now on the difference in value, because I'm actually purchasing an asset, right? And so that asset has gone up in value. But the thing is, it's gone up in value on paper. I can't sell them. This isn't like on the stock market where, if I worked for Merrill Lynch and they give me a bunch of shares and I leave the company, I could just sell them all in one transaction and make money, right? In that case, nobody really cares that they have to fork up the cash to get it, because you're not taking a risk as long as you have that cash. But in this scenario, you actually have to put up your own money and become an investor in the company, essentially, if you want to stand a chance at turning that into something meaningful someday. And so that's a question you ask yourself. You say, all right, I'm leaving this company. Do I believe in them? Are they going to be around? Are they going to have an exit? That's the real question, right? Even though the stock options have gone up in value, I don't have the right to sell them now. Now, of course, you could go to the founders and try to negotiate some sort of way to sell them, and people do that. But but there's no guarantees, right? Really, the only thing that's guaranteed in paperwork is that I can sell these things when we have an exit. And so if we don't have an exit, business goes out of business, all the cash that I just put up towards those taxes and towards the purchase of those options, completely gone. You don't get that back. Although I believe there's probably some tax deductions or something you can do there with your losses. I imagine. Scott, maybe you have more details on that, but I imagine same as the stock market, you can write that off.
You can write it off you can write off the amount that you've lost, essentially.
Including the tax amount?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. That's what I figured. But still massive risk. And to put it into perspective for you folks, I'm 35 years old. All right. I followed, Scott posted his earnings, right, over the course of his career recently. If you've seen that, I'm in a similar ballpark. I'm just a few years behind him, right? So like this is a very, very large investment for me. It is the largest investment I've ever made in my entire life. And when you think about that, this was a compensation package that's supposed to be compensation, right? And now it's literally me giving my money to invest the biggest investment of my life into something that luckily I believe in. But the scary part is I'm no longer there. So I don't even play a role in their success anymore. So it's a big gamble. But yeah, that's the gist of it, right? At least at the executive level, those are the types of risks you have to think about taking. And at the end of the day, if you decide you don't want to take those risks, then you better hope the cash comp was worth it.
So let's backtrack a minute and let's talk again about like expectations and expected.
Yeah, let's go back to that.
Expected levels. So we talked about the decision to exercise and that type of thing. Give everybody, your answer in terms of like what's a normal time horizon where all this stuff might take place. How many options, is sort of normal? I know it's different everywhere, but like, what's a good number for an SDR or an AE or a VP, both in terms of how many shares they might get or the percentage of shares, and in terms of what that potential payout might be at particular levels? Maybe walk through a couple scenarios there, if you could.
Sure. All right. I think I got all that down here. I'll try to go in order. Stop me if I go off track here.
Okay.
Just for reference here, Scott, are most of the folks in the group in leadership? Are most of them AEs, SDRs? Is it a big mix?
We've got a big, huge mix.
Okay. Mix. All right. Yeah. Got it. So we'll cover everything. So, all right, let's start with the SDR and the AE, right? Your sort of entry level type roles. If you're just coming into the organization. So look, you're going to hear different opinions on this stuff. And I think we had different opinions on our video last time when we said this, but my thought here and my sort of expectations management, you really shouldn't expect much in terms of equity at the AE or SDR level. SDR level should essentially expect nothing. It's really not why you're taking the job, right? You're going in and you should be looking for good leaders to work for at this stage in your career. You should be going in looking for a company whose coattail you could potentially ride, right? I went in from CVS with no real life sales experience and went to single platform who just got acquired and grew into a leadership role in 9 months. And that's the only reason that I was able to go from that to a VP of sales, because I picked the right company and I was able to learn from great leaders and network and ride that coattail. And so even though I didn't get equity, that company got acquired for $100 million. I got nothing out of that. It was still far and above beyond had I, gone to a company where maybe I got some more equity, but they didn't have that type of success. So that's what I say to SDRs or AEs. You really shouldn't even be thinking about equity right now. If you get some, great. Don't expect it to be a lot. I'm not going to even mention like quantity of shares. I'll touch on that. Quantity of shares is really not something you should really care much about. It's more about the percentage and what the value of the shares are. You don't know how many shares there are outstanding. And so it's irrelevant really for someone to tell you how many shares they got.
If I could add one thing, Collin,
sure.
One thing that I've said to try to get people to paint a picture and have some kind of expectations is if you're an SDR, maybe you'll be able to pay down some school debt.
Sure.
Like less than 10K.
Yeah. Maybe you'll take a weekend trip in an Airbnb, to Colorado.
Yeah. If you're an AE and an early AE, you might get enough shares that the exit, like you could buy a new car.
Yeah.
You're not going to go beyond like 50K ish. unless you're talking about these 1 in a million type, organizations that grow to be worth $50 billion. Like that's how rare.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I would say maybe there might be a couple other exceptions to that. Oh, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just like, if you're an AE, like a good exit for you would be like, you could buy a new car. That's kind of the expectation that I try to set with some folks. But I agree with you. Like, you shouldn't be taking the role thinking you're going to be getting rich. That's not what that's for.
Yeah, it's really not. And if you think about it that way, that early, like you're just going to be let down, because it's just not going to be that much money. So try to look for the things that actually can make you a lot of money, which is, like I said, going to the right company where you can have that reputation on your, on your resume. Like imagine the folks who, Gong, right? Let's use an example. Gong is probably going to have some massive exit someday. Everyone who was there and played a critical role in that, was there for 2-3 years. They're going to ride that coattail forever. Everyone else who comes after them who's trying to sell into that space is going to want to hire people from there. Right. And that's what happened at Single Platform. We were selling into restaurants. Company got acquired for 100 million. Every top salesperson there, and by top, I mean really like a lot of the people who were there, they're all directors of sales, VPs of sales at all these restaurant tech startups, right? They all poach straight from that company. So at that stage of your career, find the right leaders, find the right company. The equity is just, it's a cherry on top. It's nice if you get it, cool. It should not be the reason you take that job.
And what about at like the manager, director, VP kind of level?
Great question. I still think it's not far different. You're going to, quantity wise, you're going to get some more shares. I would still be picking my employer based on other reasons at that level. I'd probably be picking my employer based on different reasons at every level. Of course, the equity starts to have a more meaningful part of that discussion the farther you move up. But at the manager, director level, you're still going to probably make most of your money in cash. It very much depends on the stage of the company. I think that's something important to highlight here. The farther along the company goes, the less shares you're going to get. Right. So for example, the first AE, at a company might get a generous amount of options. Perhaps they came in, on a very low salary, company's bootstrap, things like that. There are those people who take those chances. I don't necessarily think that's smart for that person, but it happens and I've seen it. And then those AEs were just there from the seed stage and they actually could end up having more equity, if not the same as some executives in the end. But that's very, 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 very rare. And that's usually when you have like an AE who's kind of pairing up with some founders almost at the founding stage and they've just sort of been there along for the ride. But I have seen that stuff happen. And those are the rare exceptions where it's like a non-leader who really did well, but they probably took a lot of risk and grinded, a lot with a very little compensation for a long time to get to that point. All right, get me back on track. We were talking about, you wanted me to dive into the VP level?
Yeah, one of the things that I've tried to help people come to grips with is, and I see people in the chat, and I'll pick on John Stern even. It's like, okay, VP, you're looking at like 1 to 5% kind of thing. Walk through like what somebody in a VP role realistically might expect to earn, whether you were early stage, mid stage, upon exit. Like, what I really want people to understand is how big a company has to get for you to actually have a meaningful event.
Okay. All right. So let's throw out a few different scenarios, I guess, right? And the thing is, there's no one answer. And so I think the thing to be most cautious of is when you hear these examples that it's just different everywhere. And because it was one way, one place doesn't mean it will be that way at another. A lot of this comes down to how well you do negotiating terms and things of that nature, right? So, all right, I'll talk about one scenario that I know of where somebody came in as a VP of sales, first time VP, ran the company up to an acquisition in a relatively good amount of time. Now, what's interesting in this situation is the acquisition happened very quickly, right? So it wasn't 4 years, which means CEO could have screwed a lot of people out of their equity because it hadn't vested yet. Think about that. Imagine that scenario, right? You essentially help build a company, sell it for a bunch of dough really quickly, like insanely quickly, far faster than 4 years. And the CEO could literally just sell that company and, just no one has their options yet. They're not vested. He didn't do that. He did the right thing. And he negotiated as a part of the acquisition that everyone's equity that was granted, everyone's stock options would be fully accelerated, which means anyone who had anything vested or issued to them in the company, even if they've been there for one day, they were accelerating the vest. And he did that because he had a lot of leverage in the negotiation and he was able to, but that was the right thing to do. So at the end of the day, that VP of sales, I estimate, probably went home with between $2 to $3 million. And that was an exit that was well over 100 million, to put that into perspective. Scott, I don't know how that aligns with the type of numbers you're thinking, but I think that that's probably, I would say, if you had to put an average number on a good SMB exit for a VP who wasn't there an enormous amount of time, that's probably on the high end.
Yeah, that's high end. Yeah.
And that's my estimate, by the way. I don't know the exact numbers based on lifestyle things I've seen.
Well, listen, I've been pretty transparent with some of the things that I've gone through. And, I got a $200 million exit under my belt at Main Street Hub. I was there for 2.5 years. So I only vested, call it 60% ish. And I made 350 to 400K.
That sounds more like probably average, right?
Pretty average. Yeah.
And by average, I mean average for a VP who did a great job and did everything right.
Yeah. And it's just crazy to think about because, you think, oh, you're the original VP of sales at this company. You grew them to be this big, huge thing that sells to a name brand. Like we sold to GoDaddy. And that's what I earned.
You get diluted every step of the way, right? So your equity is also going to get diluted, which means
about one year's worth of compensation at that time in my career.
Yeah,
not that much, right? I mean,
it's not. It really isn't.
For some people right now, they might be thinking, wow, 350K, like that would change my whole entire life, and it might for you. But the more you do this, you start to realize, like, well, shit, do I really want to go work for somebody else and kill myself for 3-4 years to get a couple $100,000 payout if we have a low 9-figure exit? Is that worth it? And that's the question that you see really experienced VPs start to ask themselves, and the math that they start to do. And that's the dialogue that you start to have with the founders. So I'm sure Collin is the same way, but I get asked probably a couple times a month, hey, do you want to be the CRO? Do you want to be the VP or whatever? And I start asking those questions and doing that math. And I'm like, that doesn't really make sense for me anymore. Right. Yeah. So I just think it's important for people to have, a good understanding and expectation of what you might get, which is often a lot less than the reality is often a lot less than what people kind of have dreamed up.
Yeah. And anyone I think half these people just think probably a lot of it comes from people exaggerating what they actually got because they don't want to tell the truth. So the whole world just thinks it's bigger money than it is. Look, the founders are the ones getting rich. I think something interesting to throw in here too, that's worth knowing how this stuff works on the founder side of things. So you can understand the VP perspective where we're thinking how in many ways it's extremely unfair. And where you could see some of the grudge, the chip on our shoulder, where it comes from. But so let's say founders raise $2 million as a seed round, right? And you come in as a VP of sales, they give you some equity and, all is good. And you're working your ass off. You hit your first year target, company's doing great. We're growing. Second year, hit the target. Right now they're like, all right, let's raise another round of capital. Let's raise our valuation. We're growing. We're doing really well. Now here's the interesting thing that happens or can happen in that negotiation with the founders and the new investors. They could say, hey, founders right now are holding 30% of the company. In this transaction, while you invest this 40 million or whatever this Series B, let's call it, we want to sell 5% of our shares in that transaction. And so that means that the founders want to take money off the table before the company has an exit. And this is how you'll see the WeWorks of the world, where companies are failing, burning cash, but founders are getting very, very, very wealthy. And that is very common in startups. You'll see oftentimes investors will push back on that type of stuff for the obvious reasons. They say, look, I don't want to give you my $40 and then make you a million, or my 40 million and then make you a millionaire. You're not going to be hungry enough to work. Right. Yeah. But these are the types of negotiations that happen. The founders say, okay, we'll take someone else's 40 million then. See ya. And eventually they come to an agreement and take some money off the table. And that's how founders of failed companies even can become very wealthy.
Let's pause here, Collin. I've got at least 5 questions lined up from people. Cool. They can take themselves off mute. We might veer off in different directions a little bit, but that's okay. Gemma, you were the first person on my list that had a question.
Hi, Collin. Nice to meet you. So I have a question.
Hello, nice to meet you. Sure.
My friend, she is a demand gen marketer, individual contributor, recently just started her new role. She negotiated for a higher salary, but didn't negotiate for a higher equity. And she signed, and then her mentor told her the day after, when her mentor was available, that she also should have negotiated for a higher equity. I know that Scott has mentioned in the past, like when you're early on in your career, it's better to negotiate for a higher salary than an equity unless you're a millionaire. So I was wondering like what your thoughts are on that, and if it's worthwhile negotiating for more salary and equity.
Good question. So I agree with Scott. First and foremost, put the cash first. In my initial negotiation, I would probably not push much on the equity. I would if I had the opportunity to. Part of that will depend on how hard you had to push to get the cash you want, right? So if you're in that negotiation and there's a lot of back and forth just to get to the cash point that you want, there's very little room left to keep pushing after that, right? But if you kind of just got the cash you wanted, it wasn't too hard, you could push harder. So these are the things you have to feel out in negotiations. The other option is to just go all in on the cash in your original negotiation, get that done, get that letter signed, then go in and crush the job for 6 months, 12 months, and sit down and have a conversation and express how excited you are about the company, the future of the business, and how, you could say something like, I figured my first year is going to be really feeling the place out. And I feel like this is a place I want to be. I want to be here for the long run. And I'd like to be further, vested in the interest of the company long run. Is there a way I can work towards that? Oftentimes, it depends who you're talking to, but founders, particularly depending on the size of the company, they love to hear things like that. That sounds like someone they want on their team for the next 10 years, right? Until this thing hits the finish line. Now, it doesn't mean they're going to give you anything, but it certainly can't hurt to ask. But I would not come in and ask in her scenario, a week after she just finished negotiating. At this stage of the game, come in and prove yourself, exceed expectations. And then it's not unreasonable to sit down, I think, and have a conversation.
And if I can add one thing, every time you're negotiating for more options, your clock is restarting.
Great point.
If I negotiate and get more options, I actually don't get any of those unless I stay for at least a year because of what they call the cliff, right? So I've got to stay for 12 months before I actually have vested and earned the right to actually exercise 25% of whatever they gave me. So if you're not planning to be there for 1 to 4 more years, it's pointless to negotiate for additional equity. Really important to keep in mind. And every time you get re-upped, that clock starts over. It doesn't go
on those new options.
On the new options. It doesn't go to your original start date. So you can have a batch of options that started in 2018, another one that's 2019, another one that's 2020, another one that's 2021. So you got to be careful. This is another angle and another thing to think about in terms of whether or not it makes sense for you to negotiate more equity.
Yeah. Okay. Think about it a little bit like you're investing in the stock market, right? If you really don't believe in it long term, I would just stay away from it. But the difference here is if you're not going to stay at the company long term, it's that same thought process.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off that, the reason why she told me the story was like she realized afterwards she didn't know she could negotiate for more equity. So she told me when it comes time for me to land my full-time role and negotiate for my contract, to make sure that I negotiate for both a higher salary and equity when I have the power.
Yeah.
Whether or not she has the power is to be determined. A lot of that will just come down to how the company handles these things. So some of them just may not even be open to discussion. They have a very rigid plan that applies to the whole company, and that's just it, right? And you can ask, and they're just going to tell you this is what it is. I think larger startups tend to move into that model just because it's easier. Of course, they probably make some exceptions along the way, but Yeah. You really don't know. And so I think part of it is like feeling out how the company handles these things. Cause from what I've seen is very different at every company. Now, granted, I worked at a US company, then a French company, right? There's cultural differences. The documentation they even used to put this stuff together was very different. Like we saw some things that were just never seen in the US before. So that stuff plays a role too, right? Just understanding that. I've seen a company that had a very weird rule where they said, hey, we have a 1-year cliff, very normal, and a 4-year vest, but we put a 6-month delay on all of that. which means the 1-year cliff doesn't start until 6 months after you start at the company. Like you can find weird things like this. So there's no one size fits all. So when you get this paperwork and stuff, like, first of all, read every line of it. It's going to be the most boring thing you'll ever read. But I would really not trust anything that is said in any conversation. And that's not because you can't trust the people you're talking to. It's because they may just misspeak. They may not even understand it as well as you need to. I've seen that, right? This stuff is not easy. It's not very simple, and and not everyone understands it.
And candidly, like people like Collin and I will share agreements with each other and be like, does this look right?
Yeah. Yep.
Am I missing something here?
Because it's so hard to know if you're missing one sentence that's gonna fuck you. Excuse me.
Yeah, like I'm not a fucking lawyer. You know what I mean? I'm not an accountant.
And you know how much they wanted to charge me to read that, by the way? $1,000 an hour.
Yeah. So what my point there is, I think it's a good idea to share the paperwork that you get sometimes with people that you know and trust. And if you're very unfamiliar with this stuff, really good idea to share it with somebody who has some more experience with it, because people like us who have experience with it are still confused sometimes, still get tripped up, still want a second and third set of eyes on it, right? So don't think that you have to totally go it alone. So thanks, Gemma.
Yeah.
Vicky, you're next on the question list.
Hi. So this is my life story, my real story. I started with a startup 3 months ago. Oh, and it cost me $2,500 for my attorney to look at my stuff. Just FYI.
But smart enough to do it, though. Well done. It's a lot of
money. I would have only charged you $1,000.
Yeah, I could have hooked you up, and I thought that was expensive, $1,000 an hour. I said, "Can you do it in 30 minutes?"
That's kind of what I said. But I'm now thinking I need to get somebody to look at it and make sure that we still didn't miss anything.
That's the thing. You spend the money and you still feel like you don't know, right?
Because if I knew, I wouldn't need the attorney, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So anyway, I went in, he matched my salary, matched my benefits. I negotiated a higher commission.
Okay.
And I'm here to grow the company and ultimately run sales and marketing. And I want to know.
What's the role?
Well, whatever you want to call it. I came in at a really low title and so forth because I was coming from a competitor, and I was really concerned that they were going to sue me or find a way. I didn't have a non-compete, but I had a non-solicit, but they're asses.
Fair enough. They can't do much, by the way.
Well,
as long as you're not sharing proprietary info.
They can't, but what they can do is be a pain in my backside and mess with my business. So anyway, in that scenario, what percentage of equity should I have expected?
I would really need to know the role. That's hard to say. Are you saying you're coming in as an AE with expectations of growing into leadership?
No, I'm coming in as a whatever. I mean, he would have as a VP basically, but I'm not. But I'm growing into the role. Let's be real. I had a sales.
Collin, she has one of those gigs where it's like, come in, act as an individual contributor, and when you figure it out, then we're going to make you the head of sales.
Yeah. I figured it out, considering it's been 3 months. But
can you guys hear that? I thought I had the most amazing sound effect for that. There it is. There it is.
That's pretty good.
I've been dying to use that.
Now, also, I came into an industry that I've been in for 9 years, and he bought my experience is what he bought. So
right. Okay. What stage is the company? What are they at in terms of growth?
It's bootstrapped. And there's an entity in the UK that's been in business for almost 6 years. And then I started the entity here in the US 3 months ago.
Got it. And how many people are in the company, roughly?
Me here. And
so very small.
Oh, yeah. Me here and 4 in the UK.
All right. So we got a very small bootstrapped startup. They brought you in, they matched your cash comp, if I understood correctly.
Yeah.
And you're wondering if you got enough equity, and the role is kind of undefined. It's sort of, hey, come in, figure out how to sell our product. We'll build a team around you if you're any good at it. Is that sort of the gist of it?
That's exactly it. And he's given me complete reign on everything so far. Like I've raised prices of,
revenue wise, where's the company at? Just ballpark.
Well, in the US, we're pretty.
It's really small. Okay. All right.
I've got a lot of proposals out, but I've increased proposals from 12 to 20,000 to 20 to 40,000.
Yeah.
So, we're on the right track. But anyway, yeah.
Okay. I'll ask one more question. And by the way, these are the questions I'd probably be asking the CEO to figure this stuff out myself. Do you have a sense of who owns the company? Is it founder owned? Have they given up half of it to someone or?
No. There's 3 partners, and the one that 3 founders, and the one that I work for has controlling interest.
Got it.
I report directly. I work with him directly.
Got it. All right. So all that being said, I mean, it sounds like you should be on the high end of equity because the company is very small. You're taking a lot of risk. That said, they didn't bring you in with a defined title. It's almost like a little bit gray. It's kind of like, are they saying that you've earned that role yet, or you kind of have to earn it and then prove it? Like that seems a little gray. So maybe they want to, perhaps they're going to say that you need to do something before, you get that real VP equity or something. But I would say that this is definitely in the like 1+% range, probably on the higher end of that. Right, Scott?
Oh, well, then I guess I did real well.
Good for you. Yeah.
Well done. Well done.
Well done is right.
Especially because you got the cash you're looking for. Because that means nothing, right? The 1 to whatever percent. If you got 5%, great. I mean, that's incredible, I would say. But a lot of it depends. Like, how experienced are the founders? Have they ever done this before? Do they know that 1 to 5% is a ballpark, or could you say 10 and they don't know? These things matter.
It's also it's very important, Vicky, to consider what the potential outcome might be. So if the biggest outcome might be, a $10 million exit, and 5% might make sense. But if the biggest potential outcome is 8 billion, 5% would be absolutely extreme.
It would be madness.
Yeah. Absolute extreme, right? You'd never get that.
Although I don't know, at a company that small, I would push for it though. They're bringing her in, like not giving her the full title, like.
So the thing is too, he has a 5-year exit strategy, and he doesn't plan on taking on any.
Well, I think Collin and I both agree that you did pretty well to get.
It sounds like it, yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah. As long as they match that cash comp, and you're as long as it sounds like you're happy if the company. Well, I shouldn't say it that way, but you'll walk away in good shape if the equity turns into nothing. You still did well.
Yeah. Yes, I'll be fine.
Thanks,
Vicky. So that's a good scenario.
Very much.
Jessica, let's go to you. You had a great question.
Hey, thanks so much, Scott. Hi, Collin. So I listened to the recording that Scott sent out from last year, and my question came around time frame of when you get the money. And Scott was giving an example of he exited, and then he kept saying, I'm waiting for the exit to happen. And so and then you mentioned something about an event where you're allowed to sell. Yeah. So this isn't like regular stock where I can sell if I want. So can you explain a little bit around there? Yeah. And maybe Scott, you remember what I'm talking about.
Well, I think you're getting tripped up a little bit on some of the terminology. Like there's a difference between exercising and then the actual exit happening. And then there's a period of time that goes by after the company is sold where I'm just sitting there wondering, when is my check going to show up? So there's some of these different kind of moments. So I'll let Collin answer, and I'll see if I can add anything.
Okay.
Yeah. So exercising and liquidating are two different things, right? So you have your stock options first get granted to you, and then they vest over time, right? And then the next step in that process would be for you to exercise them, which basically means you're buying them, right? You're saying, hey, think of your stock option grant as like a coupon. They're saying, hey, here's a coupon. It expires on a certain date, and this coupon stays good as long as you work here, and you can use it to buy these stock options, right? So exercising would be that first step, and that's where you're just buying the options. It doesn't mean you're turning them into money. In fact, you're doing the opposite. You're giving your money for them. Now what you're waiting for is a liquidity event, which is generally going to be an acquisition or an IPO, which means that company is essentially liquidating, right? They're selling the company, they're selling the shares. This is an opportunity for you to sell your shares, okay? Ideally at a higher price. And so that can happen, again, acquisition, IPO. There can be other weird scenarios where it could happen. I've heard about this before where, like, let's say like a seed or a Series A company, perhaps they're trying to raise another round. Maybe they're not doing so well, and they actually want to get some equity back. Like maybe they need some more equity. And so they might offer to some of their employees, like if they have a new investor that says, hey, we want 20% of the business. Let me reframe it this way. Investor says, hey, we'll invest. We want 20%. And founders say, we don't really have 20% to give you. We have 15. So they may say, why don't we open up a pool to our employees and we can offer 5% of that employee pool to actually sell their shares to these investors, right? So some weird things like that can come up. Scott, I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's rare. You can't count on it. But like those are the types of, I would say, like unexpected events where you might be able to liquidate your shares. Question is, do you even want to do it then? Is that the right price to sell them at? Obviously, if these investors are going to buy them, they believe they're going to be worth more. So you might not want to do that. As soon as I left Aircall, I had investors pinging me every day, offering to exercise my options and buy them. Most companies won't even let you do that. But yeah, that for me, by the way, was reassurance that I probably should exercise them because I had professional VCs who wanted them that told me they're probably going to be worth more someday.
There's a lot of variance here, Jessica. I mean, your original question said, can you explain when you're allowed to sell the stock?
Yeah.
Right? Well, you can't actually sell it unless the company goes public, and then you're selling it back. Or in Collin's case, you have an institutional investor reach out to you that says, I would love to buy this off of you, right? And that's different than when you're allowed to exercise. You can actually exercise day one, even when you haven't vested. There's something called an 83B election. That is tax purposes and implications. You're paying taxes straight away on the super low, value of whatever those options are. You don't have to do it right away. You can do it later on. You can wait until you've vested 25% and exercise at that point in time.
Scott, what happens if somebody does that and then they leave before they vest?
Say that one more time.
What happens if somebody does that and then they leave before they vest?
If they exercise but leave before they've vested any of it?
Yeah, I actually didn't know that you could do that. Is that, I assume, because they want to try to get capital gains, everything out of the way early?
That's right. I mean, if you leave before you vest, I believe you're shit out of luck.
Yeah, so that's a very risky thing to do.
Yes, it's very risky, but it's also very cheap typically. So if you do the 83, if you're in early and you do the 83B, like you might get, if you're in a VP role, you might get 500,000 shares and they might be like 0.0001 cent. So it literally might cost you $100 if you're in early enough. So it's like, well, whatever, I'll lose my $100. That
makes sense.
How you play. But if it's later on, then yes, it could be, 150,000 to exercise. Right. You might not be willing to just light that money.
Well, it's my scenario, right? Had I done what you said, had I exercised my Aircall options the day they were granted to me, or at least significant 6 months before I left, before they raised that next round, like I would have not incurred those taxes because the actual stock options, I would have paid what they were still worth on paper.
Yeah. That's one of the tricks of the trade and way to play the game is if you know your company is about to do another fundraising round, if you have the capacity to exercise and believe that these stocks are going to be worth something, you should exercise before they raise the next round. Because
you said that to me a year ago, and I just let it go in one ear and out the other, and I got screwed, and it cost me some money.
So
I think it would be helpful if you told people about strike price, like the basics of what you're exercising and stuff like that.
Go ahead, Collin.
Yeah. So strike price is the price that you're getting the options at. So it's basically like your coupon. You can buy it for this price, right? You might actually get stock options. Let's say you get them at a strike price of $1. Fair market value in some situations could actually be higher than that. But I'm drawing a blank on exactly what the evaluation is called, Scott. But there's when companies raise rounds of funding, they go through is it a 49A
40
valuation?
409, yeah.
For 49B, whatever, the numbers aren't important, but anyway, they go through basically an assessment. When they're raising round, they go through a formal assessment to 409A. John just put it there. Thank you. And they're determining the valuation of the business, right? So when you watch Shark Tank and stuff, and they're doing this negotiation, they're trying to arrive at a valuation of the business, which is ultimately determining what the value of each of those shares are worth, right? So that strike price that John mentioned is what you are going to have to pay to exercise those options. And that's why they're valuable, because generally as an employee, that strike price is lower than they're worth or intended to be worth. And nobody else has the right in a startup, in the public, nobody else can get those. And that's why it is attractive, right? Because you can't just buy them if you're not an employee. So the strike price will increase over time if the company is doing well. And employees who come in later than you will have higher strike prices, right? So their options are not as attractive as yours. That's why they'll also probably get less stock options, right? As those prices are going up, right? Yeah. That's why I say if you join a company at Series A and you get 1% of that business, you're getting less stock options than the person who joins a year later and gets 1%. Or sorry, you're getting more stock options than the person who comes later. So the price you're going to pay, so let's say price goes up to $2. My strike price is $1. My profit margin is the what's left, right? It's the dollar in between, and that's where I'm going to pay taxes and hopefully earn money.
Did we answer your question, Jessica?
Yeah, you sure did. Thanks so much. Okay, appreciate it.
Great.
No problem. Eric, you're next. Eric Davidek.
Off mute. There we go. Now I'm off mute.
There you are.
Well, I don't want to get too far in the weeds on that, but I'm curious about the timing. So just to give you the scenario with regard to that tax implication is pretty interesting. So I was, granted equity. It was, I think a pretty generous.
Granted options
amount. No.
You got granted equity.
I got granted equity.
Wow. You didn't have to pay for it.
I'm a better negotiator. I'm a better negotiator than you thought, Scott.
Touche.
So the equity grant, I don't have, we just had our Series B.
There's no vesting schedule on that at all?
There is, yeah, it does vest over 4 years.
Okay. So you're saying that they're giving you the shares, they vest, but they're given to you. They're granted to you. You do not have to exercise them. They're not options.
Correct.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's awesome, by the way.
Yeah, I kind of thought so. So I guess with regard to the tax thing is just confusing for me. So, if and I've already forgot the note,
83B.
83B. Thank you. So essentially I could, I guess the question, this is how confused I am. I don't even know how to ask the question. So essentially I would pay tax on whenever that's exercised.
Well, if you're telling me that you have equity in the company, not stock options, then you don't have to exercise anything. If I'm understanding this correctly, you just are a shareholder in the business.
Of course.
Right. In which case the only time you're going to
I confuse myself.
Well, so look, in which case the only time you're going to pay taxes if you sell that equity for more than you own it for. You're going to take income and you're going to pay taxes on it. That's it. You don't need to exercise, but that's very unusual. It's incredible if it is the case. I would probably, unless you're 1,000% sure, it sounds confusing to me. I would look at that, but it's very uncommon if it was given to that way.
Yeah, we went.
You're certain of it. It wasn't like maybe they misunderstood. Okay, cool. That's great, man. That's good.
Okay. Well, cool, man. 3 softball.
But well, hey, you might want to ask someone who's more familiar with that type of agreement, though, just to get a double check, because I have not been given equity like that before.
Yeah, me either. Well done. Yeah. All right, Eric. Thanks. Valerie. Okay. Valerie, your turn.
All right. So I have probably a pretty basic question, but is the only exit that you actually make money at when they go public, they go IPO, or are there other ways that you can make money during an exit?
An acquisition could be another one. So going public is one, and then an acquisition, another company's buying your company.
Than going public, by the way.
Yeah.
But I've always heard that during an acquisition, kind of those options kind of get wiped out. At least that's what's happened to me in the past. And I wasn't in a place where I was going to make any real money, let's be honest. But the options just kind of went away. And they were just like, what happened? Oh, yeah, you don't get them anymore.
Yeah, so that probably sounds familiar to the scenario I described earlier, where there could be some sort of a liquidity event, which is like an IPO or an acquisition where you can liquidate your options, but perhaps yours weren't fully vested. There's also all sorts of sneaky clauses in these things that can paint pictures from various scenarios where things like that could happen. That's again why it's like really important to read through all of it. But it's tough to know without knowing the details of whatever happened with the company there. Like, it's possible, was the company doing well, or were they failing and it was like maybe sold at a loss?
No, it was doing well enough. They sold our brand.
Do you know if it was a profitable sale or?
It was, yeah.
It was. Okay. So that's something to note, right? If they sold a company at a loss, you're not getting anything anyway.
Of course. Yeah.
I mean, the easiest, most generic answer to your question is yes, there are other ways other than going public. Okay. When a company sells and gets acquired by somebody else, you often will either get cash payment, cash plus equity in the acquiring company, or all of your equity can transfer over to equity in the acquiring company. Those are the three most common kind of scenarios. So I've had, I think I'm on my second hand. I think I've had about 6 exits of various sizes. None of them are IPO. None.
Okay.
And I've made money of different amounts on all of those things. So I think the scenario you're talking about is an unfortunate one. But if the company you're at sells to somebody else, sells to my company for $500 million today, for a cash kind of deal, you're getting paid.
Okay. Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. All right. Kelly. I see you, Kelly.
Okay. I was trying to unmute. Sorry about that.
Hello.
But thank you guys. Thank you, Collin and Scott. This is really great info.
Of course.
Speaking of sneaky clauses, that's what my question is around. Being fully vested and then realizing after you leave that there's a clause in there saying that if you leave for any reason, that you are only allowed to exercise a portion of your options rather than all of your fully vested options.
Was that based on... let me make sure I understand. So was that based on when you left? Like they're saying you weren't fully vested, or is that based on the reason you left?
It was when, because I was granted stock options twice.
Okay.
So while I was there, our company sold twice. After they sold the second time, I was granted options. And then there was a reverse split at one point. And I was fully vested with those. I was given another round of options. I was not fully vested in those when I left. So with the first round I was, but then I realized after the fact that there was a clause in there that if you leave for any reason, because I left on my own accord voluntarily, that you were only eligible to purchase a portion of the options, even though they were fully vested.
Got it.
Is that a customary?
I'm not familiar with it. It doesn't surprise me. It sounds like the type of thing that, like, had I seen it in there, when you were negotiating your job offer, I would have tried to redline that type of line. But these are the types of things that they put in, right? And the more lines like this that they have at the end of 10 years, the more equity they're taking back from their employees. That's really what it comes down to. And I'm sorry that happened to you, but it sounds like it is exactly what it is. It was intended. You think about the reason.
And listen, it's predatory.
Yes.
Well, and these were given to me while I was a current employee. Like it wasn't an offer negotiation.
Yeah, but let's call it what it is. It's predatory practice.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's not super common, but your story is also not totally uncommon, because these types of things, whether it's that quirk or a different kind of quirk, the game has been rigged in other people's favor. And so it's on us to educate ourselves to the best we can. So we enter into these arrangements, you know, with everybody's cards face up, right? Yeah. So it's just like Collin said, that's a super unfortunate situation that you run into. And it's, I would say it's not super common though, but I'm also not that surprised, because
same reaction.
This is the type of shit that people do. Did you know, for example, in everybody's, I've yet to see an agreement without this, in every single person's option equity agreement, did you know if you die?
Yeah, that's in there too.
The equity and options do not pass down, even if you've exercised, do not go to your family. So I have exercised 6 figures worth of equity in my last company, Qualia.
Don't die.
Yeah, exactly. I can't gift those in any way, shape, or form to my family should I pass away. So if I die before I get paid by Qualia through an exit, we get nothing.
Wonder if you can insure that somehow through your life insurance.
Maybe there's ways. To me, the point is, like, this is one of those predatory kind of practices. Because if I was to die, they now get 700,000-ish options that they can give to somebody else. Mm-hmm. That doesn't seem right.
You want to hear the other side of it? Well, by the way, I agree with you.
The ones I didn't get to exercise were given away to someone else also.
Of course, that's exactly what it is. Yeah. Yeah. And their logic behind it, just because like I think it's interesting when I've talked to some VCs, I'll bounce this stuff off of them, and like, they're living in a different world. You have to realize that they're not the ones coming into the office every day. They're not the ones, you know, living through these scenarios. And so in a lot of their heads, it's interesting. They actually think this stuff is set up to be fair. Like, what I would imagine a VC would say in response to that is, we want our employees to have equity. So if they're going to leave, then they shouldn't have it. Like, that's the kind of attitude that is probably behind that clause, which is so insane because you contributed to the company during the time you were an employee. Like, that's right. The point of vesting, right? Like, that's literally the point. So yeah, it's crazy. Look out for that stuff.
Yeah. Good question. Okay. Thanks, Kelly.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Kelly.
Brian, you are next. Brian.
What's up, guys? Hey, so, Collin, cool talking to you. I know we kind of chat.
Likewise. Nice to see you there.
So here's my question. First time in a SaaS position, I'm brand new SDR. I was given equity at the company that I'm at, but I've never done this before. So just to make sure that I understand everything that was explained a little bit earlier, 4-year vested period, I get about 25% of it after my first year, which after my research, it sounds like that's pretty common. When I get access to those first 25%, whatever that initial price that I get access to, that's my initial strike price. If Correct. I don't purchase those initial 25 after that first year, and let's say it's a situation like your own where they do raise another round of funding, so that from that moment forward, my strike price is going to be higher than it was during that period, or does it remain at the 25?
Strike price stays the same. The difference is you'll pay tax on that increase if you wait. And that's what happened to me. That's the scenario I described before that Scott warned me about, is I didn't exercise early at Aircall. And I had reasons for doing it, right? The company wasn't in the same position it's in today. Like, it's a lot different in hindsight when they raise a next round and you're like, oh, this company's going to be huge. Beforehand, you're like, I don't know. A lot of things could go wrong. So, like, you know, just to give context there. But yes, I ended up having to pay taxes on the increase in value, even though I didn't really get that. It's on paper, right? So let's say my stock options were a strike price of $1, and then they raise a round of funding. The new strike price is $3. That doesn't mean my strike price is going up, but that means the value of the asset that I'm now purchasing is worth more than I'm paying for it. And so the government views that as I'm earning money, but I really haven't. And that's why this is really not a pretty scenario, but I had to pay taxes on that increase in value, even though I have an asset now that I can't sell today. So that's the risk I take on.
Gotcha.
So yes, your strike price will not change, but you'll pay taxes. So the advantage to exercising early is to avoid that tax. But when you think about it this way, you're going to pay the tax anyway if the company has an exit. And so in my case, like that's how I justify it. I'm like, sucks to give the money to the government now because I can't earn interest on it, but I am going to have to pay that one way or the other, assuming air call is successful. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and just to reiterate, to make sure that I got it that time. So really what you're doing is that you're paying the tax difference between that $1 and that $3 because they're looking at it as a capital gain, even though you're not getting
exactly.
Even though you haven't
correct
fully benefited.
Even though you've gained nothing but a piece of paper. Yeah.
Gotcha. And then if you end up losing out on that and doesn't,
you could do a tax deduction like Scott mentioned earlier. So if you lose that money, just like if you lose money in the stock market, you can write it off against any gains later on.
Got you.
I'm not sure how long that carries on. I know in the stock market, I think it just carries forward forever. You can just keep writing off losses if you haven't. I'd imagine it's the same, but I don't know for certain there.
Got you. How big is that number that you can write off? Can you write off the whole thing, or is it only a percentage of that?
There is definitely a limit to how much loss I believe you can write off in the stock market. Scott, do you know offhand? Maybe someone else in the group knows. I'm almost certain there's a limit on that.
I actually don't know.
Or actually, you know what? I might be saying that completely backwards. Because actually I just had this conversation with someone. And if I recall correctly, it's someone, I think it's Warren Buffett, who still has like hundreds of millions of, he just has this accrued amount of tax credits that he's just built from, selling losses in the market for so long. I actually don't know the answer to that. I don't want to say the wrong thing.
Gotcha. Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Likewise. Just stay away from getting, you don't hit a limit of tax deductions for losses. Try to avoid those losses.
Yeah, I'm not in crypto. I should be good.
Good stuff, man.
That's a whole nother Tequila Tuesday topic right there. The crypto scene. What are Collin? What are some? How do I phrase this? What are some sneaky or not often talked about things that get inserted into agreements? And then the opposite of that would be, what are some really good questions up front that somebody might ask to better understand like the opportunity that they're entering into and what they might get out of all this? Like in running through that math, that scenario I was talking about, for example, where somebody comes to me and says, I have a CRO role for you. I want you to take the company from 2 million in ARR to 20 million in the next 2 years. And then we're going to sell the thing. And I'm like, okay, well, that's going to be only worth this much to me. Help people ask the right kind of questions a little bit. And and also know what to look out for, like in Kelly's situation where there's like some kind of sneaky clause.
Yeah, I think the first high level there with the sneaky clause thing, and this is hard for people, especially if you're not familiar with reading through legal documents. Like I've gotten more familiar over the years, but first step is just really read through it and see if something just doesn't make sense to you and highlight it and get answers to those questions. Like I think that's the first place to start, is to actually try to understand what you're signing. And deferring to lawyers, all that stuff, not a bad idea, but read it first yourself. Like really don't try to just pawn this stuff off. I know it's boring, but if you read through it, you will walk away with probably 10, 20 great questions to go ask someone before you sign that. But some good examples, right? So you should understand the difference between common and preferred stock. So there's basically different asset classes. And I'll break it down really simply, right? Let's say you've got an investor here who put in $10 million into the company. They're going to get preferred shares possibly. And then you've got me, a VP, I'm going to get common stock, right? And there's different details that can go around that. But what that generally means is that in a liquidity event, that preferred stock, they're going to get paid first, right? And so depending on how much that company was acquired for or IPO'd for, is there any money left for you after they get paid is the question. There are also, I forget the name of this, Scott, help me, but I think it's a double trigger acceleration.
Single trigger and double triggers that you can.
Do you want to cover that? My memory is a little gray on that, if you know it offhand.
Well, a single trigger would be some sort of compelling event that changes the way that you operate in a company. So control, for example, somebody buys a company. If you have a single trigger, off you go. Double trigger might mean you move headquarters beyond 60 miles from my hometown, and or you hire somebody above me to do my job. There's all these little things that you can bake in there that would trigger an automatic vest. So if I negotiate properly, and I'm 3 years into my stint at Ring Pen, John Stern's company, and Stern is like, I'm moving headquarters to LA. And I'm like, well, what the fuck, man? Like, I'm not commuting to LA, but I've negotiated up front. Like, that's one of my triggers. Okay, I get to fully vest, or, you know, change of control, or somebody gets parachuted in above me and hired as a CRO and I'm the VP. So you can try to negotiate these types of things. It's very, very hard to get a single trigger. It's very doable if you're a VP to get a double trigger that accelerates your vesting.
Thank you. My memory was clearly wrong on those, because for some reason I was thinking those were things that we needed to look out for, but it's more the opposite. It's things you want to try and negotiate for.
It's things you want to negotiate. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. What else? What did we miss? I know we covered a lot of, I'm just looking back at our notes from the last session, because we covered a lot of the things to look out for. I don't know if we missed any of the big ones, Scott.
I don't know that we have either, but
okay, I didn't know if you had one in mind when you asked me that. Okay.
No, we got.
I'm trying to think if we missed any of the big ones.
We got a couple questions. We got a question from Jeff.
Okay, let's do that.
And then one from John. Jeff, you want to go first? Jeff, we can't hear you, FYI. You got no audio. Still can't hear you. I'm going to come back to you, Jeff. Sort your audio out. John, let's go to you.
Scott, I think if you talked about, you know, most people I've heard of don't even have the money to exercise their options when they leave. And that's a consideration that people need to take. You talked about, you know, exercising, getting 6 figures or whatever. Maybe planning for that, or understanding what's involved when you actually do leave to make sure that you can take advantage of it.
Yeah, go ahead, Collin. Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, it really is what you just said. It's about planning for it. What I did not plan for this time around, and again, I keep saying it like Scott warned me and I just really forgot about it, was that tax implication. I was prepared to exercise my options, and I had the cash set aside for the strike price times however many options I had. I was not realizing that I was going to be paying taxes right now on the increase in value. And that was very unexpected and not easy to deal with, especially during a down market and every, you know, asset being in the shit hole right now. Sorry for my language, but yeah, I think it really is. It's just about planning it and understanding that timeline, having a sense of like if and when you may leave the company, but also I think having a backup plan for if you leave that company voluntarily is probably a very good idea, especially at the executive level, because the dollar amount's so big, right? And freeing up that kind of cash can be tough. That said, I will tell you as an executive, and this is worth writing down, this is one of those big tips that just came to me. So the exercise period, generally default is going to be 90 days, which means if you get fired
also,
or you
sorry
quit,
to interrupt, this is also something you can negotiate and try and
that's what I'm going to say. Yeah. Exactly. So by default, it's going to be 90 days. And this is really by design, right? They want to be able to essentially, I mean, look, I say it like this, I don't know, maybe there's some nice people out there and didn't have bad intentions, but really like when you put something together and you say, hey folks, if we fire you in 90 days, you have to pay me for these stock options or we take them back. In my humble opinion, that's pretty much saying, if we fire you, we don't want you to have these options, right? Because who's in a position to like invest while they're getting fired? It's crazy. So that said, like Scott just mentioned, you can try to negotiate this stuff and maybe they'll just give you a flat no, but it's worth trying, right? And so at any point in time when I negotiate options, I try to come in straight out of the gate that it's non-negotiable, that my exercise period is 10 years. And the reason for that is I don't want to have to exercise my options when I leave unless they're going to be worth money, right? I want to buy myself that time. Now, again, if I wait those 10 years, I didn't, get to hold it for a year prior to liquidating. And so there's some tax advantages to holding the asset after you exercised it. Same as a stock, right? If so if you hold a stock for a year, you're going to pay you're going to pay capital gains tax at the end of that year if you sell it, rather than if you hold it for less than a year. So it's really tough, John, to plan those things out a lot. Like you're betting on the future of the company while also betting on like if you're going to still be there, because you're trying to figure that timeline out as well. And it's really, really hard. So I think I'm not giving you the best of answer, but I would say the best of answer really is to think about it and to have a plan for both scenarios. I did not do that. I had a plan for one scenario. I did not have a plan for COVID happening and losing my job. Luckily, I was able to figure it out and not lose those options. But that would have been a nightmare. Imagine like I just couldn't exercise them, and I put in 3 years, I would say, for almost nothing at that point, And
then this gets into a little bit of like how to manage your finances and be responsible or whatnot, but like you need to have cash on hand. If you're in this kind of startup world with options floating around, you got to have cash on hand. This is why that old mantra of like the best salesperson out there is a partially broke salesperson is total bullshit. It's total bullshit. So if you're making 65 grand a year and you're driving a fucking $100,000 BMW, you're an idiot. You don't look cool. You look like a fucking idiot is what you look like. Yeah. You need to be saving as much as you can for these moments that might be really impactful. Can you imagine if Collin leaves Aircall or I leave Qualia and neither one of us have the cash on hand to exercise? Can you imagine how painful that would be? What some people have to do is they have to go to the bank and take out a loan.
Yeah.
And say,
my buddy did that. Yeah.
I don't have the money right now, but I'm going to be worth 6, 7, 8 figures in a couple of years. And then you have to pay interest on it. So
my buddy did that through his life insurance. Actually, that's how our last company, Doctor.com, just got acquired, 6 months ago. And it was very out of the blue. We weren't really prepared for it. And, some people had to pull some strings, right, to exercise, to figure out how to exercise it. Now, in that case, there was an acquisition. So he actually only needed the money like temporarily to exercise, and then he was going to get all of the money back. But so he actually needed that cash to do that transaction.
Yeah. All right, Jeff, let's try you again, buddy.
All right. Can you hear me now, Scott?
Yes, sir. We got you now.
Awesome.
Hi, Jeff.
Awesome. Thanks. Hi, and nice to meet you. Thanks for putting this on, Scott. Super helpful. It's just a year too late for me. But the question I wanted to ask is that is it at all common for a stock agreement to not be available until after you become an employee? Because that's what I was told when I got my offer, and I have in writing what my options are. But and shame on me for just kind of not even requesting it after I got hired. So I have yet to still see it. But is that something that is common, or is that totally shady?
Common, hard to say. Shady, 100%. If somebody's making you an offer to come work for them and you have a compensation package that is supposed to, support your life and your family, you should have every detail of that compensation package in front of you before you're asked to sign anything. And yeah, it would be a huge red flag if someone doesn't want to show me that before signing it, especially if you still haven't gotten it now. It's very strange. My question to them would be, why? Why do you not want me to see that?
Right.
And see what they say. Is there something in there you don't want me to see? How can I agree to this without seeing it? How?
What was explained to me is that because I'm not an employee of the company, it has extremely proprietary information in it.
That's fine. You can sign a non-disclosure agreement.
Yeah, that's right. See, Collin just had a really good sentence there. Your pushback is, no worries. Send me over your NDA, your non-disclosure agreement. I'll sign that. And then you can share with me the equity and options kind of paperwork. I'm with Collin 100%, just to be clear. Like, I'm not signing shit.
It's crazy, right? Like, I would take even an aggressive tone with someone like that, the way I am right now, because it is bullshit. right? I almost answered that question too nicely. The fact that someone is asking you to sign something without telling you the details of it is as sketchy as it could possibly be. And to think that they could even talk to a grown adult and pass that off as okay is wrong. It's just wrong. And it shouldn't be done. It's the reason we're having these meetings in the first place.
That's right.
You 100% have the right to not only ask for it, but demand it, and to laugh at them if they say that they want to hire you without showing it. It's crazy. Now, granted, I don't know your scenario. Maybe it's a great job. Maybe it's a great company. So like, take this with a grain of salt. There's obviously more factors to weigh into how you react to something like that. But
it's just another red flag. As far as I'm concerned, Scott, it's just a scenario, and it doesn't surprise me at all at this point. But with being my first rodeo with a startup and options, in this type of a position, there's no, I don't know of a book or a roadmap or anything that says the do's and don'ts.
There really isn't, Jeff. And honestly, that's one of the reasons why Collin and I, do stuff like this.
Yeah.
Is to try to educate people. And I got to be honest with you, people don't want us to do things like this. They really don't. I get a lot of hell and a lot of pushback, from investors and CEOs and whatnot about this kind of thing. So there is no playbook. There is no roadmap. There is no like startup 101 guide. Fuck, maybe Collin and I should get together and collaborate and write.
It's on my list, man. It is on my list. It's just, to be honest with you, it's the most boring thing for me to create a course on.
Yeah.
That's why it's not top of the list.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, but wouldn't it be great? It may sound boring, but think of all those individuals out there that are like me. You could build it totally out of essentially case studies and stories like mine.
Yeah. My only fear with it, to be honest with you, is like if I misspeak or I say something that is outdated next year, like we're talking about serious financial, impacts on people. So for that reason, I'm a little nervous of documenting.
Yeah, we'd have to get it really right.
Yeah, it would have to be a very serious project.
Yeah, we'd have to get it really right. Thanks, Jeff. Lawrence, let's go to you, Lawrence.
Yeah, so I'm in a situation where I jumped to a Series A startup, I'm the first AE, came on with another AE. He did not work out, so I'm the only AE right now. Things are going
not a bad place to be, my friend.
Yeah. All deals.
You were the second?
Yeah, I was the second.
You were the second and you kicked the first out. I love it. That's a great place to start.
So I found product market fit, things are going well now, but I kind of feel like as I get to my 1 year mark, I should be renegotiating pretty heavily on terms of if I'm the only one bringing in deals, kind of hold the purse strings. And I'm I do have a decent amount of equity, but I want to kind of think about how do I go about that conversation at that point?
Okay. First of all, congratulations. It's an awesome place to come in. Like I said earlier, when you find that rock, that AE, that early rock, that's going to really be, that person that's going to help you get the traction. Yeah. It's one of the best places to be.
Lawrence is the guy that Collin and I need when we're the VP of sales.
Yeah. You're in the best position you could possibly be in, especially because the first one didn't work out. It makes it even stronger. It sucks to kind of be the first person who does work out because they don't really know if someone else is better. But when you're the second, they kind of learn the hard way. So not needless to say, you're in a great place. Depending on, do you feel like you're compensated? I'm trying not to have you throw out personal information, but for your role, are you at sort of fair market value right now? Are you feeling like you're underpaid? What is the driver behind wanting more money? Is it just because you're the only person there, or is it because you feel like you're not paid fairly?
I wouldn't say not paid fairly. I'm 3 years out of college, so I'm in a pretty decent spot. I think it's there are higher, if I was at a more established company, I could be getting a little bit of a higher compensation. And I also think the general risk of the vesting periods, a decent amount of my salary isn't equity, and these vesting periods are going to be pretty significant length. So I think about that.
Sure. You believe in the company long term? You feel like you're at a good place? You want to be there for a while?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So then it makes sense to have a longer term conversation. So this is the reason. I'll throw two things in here. Number one, as a sales leader, this is the reason that I normally put together a whole career development plan with salaries, with comp, everything mapped out so people know exactly what they need to do to get to the next stage. Otherwise, as a sales leader, you're going to have this exact conversation 100 times a week. But that being said, what I would do is I would initiate that conversation with your leader. I would have a sit down and say, look, I love it here. I'm doing really well. I want to be here for the long term. If it's okay with you, at some point, in the next month or two, I'd like to have a conversation about what the longer term future looks like for me. What can I expect to work my way into a year from now, potentially 2 years from now, and start the conversation that way. That way, you're not just coming in asking for more money. You're first expressing your satisfaction at the company, the fact that you want to be there for a while. Those are the things they want to hear first, and then try to discuss what it looks like long term. I always think it's a good idea to first start by just asking them what they have in their mind for you. See if they've even thought about it before, and start there. If they haven't thought about it, maybe you want to suggest, hey, can we put some thought into it? And maybe put something on the calendar in a week and catch up and talk about it. Now, that said, when you sit down and have a conversation, just be transparent. Say, look, I'm looking to make a lot of money. How can I do it? Tell me what I need to do. If you have a specific number in mind that you want to get to, tell them. Say, hey, here's my goal. Here's what I want to earn this year. Here's what I want to get to next year. Do you think this is realistic? That's the first question. And if the answer is yes, what do I need to do to get there? That's it. I always tell people, don't ask for raise, don't ask for promotion. Just ask if you think, to express the interest in what you want. Ask if they think it's doable, and then ask what you need to do to get there.
Yeah, very specifically, what do I need to do to get there?
Yes.
Yeah. And then go do it.
Exactly. Think about what that looks like, right? If you walk into your manager, say, hey man, I've been doing this for a year. Like, I'm burnt out. I'm ready for a promotion. Like, that's not a great tee up to a conversation. And the manager's immediately going to get defensive because they feel like, they don't have the right answer to the question right now or whatnot. But if you start the conversation by expressing how ecstatic you are to be here, how bought into this you are, how much you're drinking the Kool-Aid, but then you talk about your own goals and the things that you want to make sure are lined up for your future, and you figure out, can we have a discussion to make sure that we're able to make those two align? That's a good way to enter that conversation.
And for what it's worth, you should have that conversation when you're in a position of strength and power, not in a position of weakness. So you don't
come after a slow quarter.
That's right. You don't go have that conversation after you just missed your number.
Yeah. You
don't go have that conversation when you're on pit. You go have that conversation when you're dominating and you're in control.
Yeah.
Right. And that's seems obvious, but I can't even tell you how many times I'd have people come up to me and ask me for things. And I'm like, are you fucking joking, Collin? Like, you just missed your
crazy
number 2 quarters in a row. I'm trying to figure out whether I should fire you, and you're asking me for a raise, or you're asking me for more equity. Get out of here.
Yeah. That's why I say tee that convo up with getting a sense of where their head's at about your future. Cause it'll give you a sense. Like, if they haven't even thought about it, I hate to say it, but they may not think that highly of you, because if you're one of the best, in this case, you're one person on a team, so it's a little different, but like, if you're one of the best on a team and you ask that to your manager, Scott or me, like, there's no way that Scott or I, as a VP of sales, didn't already in our heads have a sense of what the future looked like for most of our top people. Like, we had a plan, right. We thought about it. And so maybe we didn't talk to you about it yet, because it just didn't feel like it was the right time yet. But that's why I think that's the right way to tee up that convo. But really, like, as companies evolve, these things should be answered without having to ask for them. I think, like, it should really be pretty transparent. That's how I've always tried to run things, at least, so that it's just transparent. Here's the program. Here's what it looks like. Here's what you have to do to get to the next steps. And everyone's on a level playing field.
All right. I got, we'll do one more question. Hayden just snuck one in right at the buzzer, Hayden.
Sweet. Thank you. Yeah. Collin, big fan. I remember watching that video a year ago and reached out, and definitely like all your content that you're posting. I think kind of similar to Lawrence's comment, not necessarily about equity, but as far as redundant, annual quota increases, as far as, hey, sorry, we need, quotas going up by 100,000 for everyone, for instance. What are some types of questions that you typically have to arm yourself when you're having those conversations with your manager about your quota, to provide pushback if maybe one person out of the 8 AEs actually hit their quota because they, closed one large deal, for instance?
He's throwing you a massive curveball, Collin. This doesn't have anything to do with equity.
No, it's fine. No, look, this is easy. Look, it's almost the same answer in different contexts. This is like one of those things where if you have to ask, something's already shady. Okay. If I'm raising my team's quotas, they're not walking out of that room without knowing exactly why and exactly how we're going to get there. And any leader, I don't know your leader. I don't want to, unintentionally insult someone, but I can just, based off of what you told me, there's something wrong with that conversation, that you are changing the benchmark of success and your team doesn't know why. And they don't know how they're going to get there. And I can tell you what the result of that's going to be. They're not going to get there because as the leader, you haven't even painted the picture of why and how. So my questions would be based specifically around that. Can you break down for me the logic, the thought process behind the change and how you think we're going to get there? Right? You're my leader. Let's show me how we're going to do it. And then if I'm bought in, I'm bought in. But if you're telling me that 8 people, hit quota out of the whole team, and there's no measurement there's no plan for how we're going to make up for it. Right. So if someone says we're going to raise quotas 20%, you need to have a plan for a 20% increase in your pipeline. You need to have a budget for creating that pipeline. And if you can't show that to your team, then how can you justify raising their goals? Well, there could be a couple other ways. Maybe we launched a new product and our average deal size is going to go up. Maybe we launched some new features and now we can go from selling SMB to selling mid-market, and I'm raising your quota, but I'm letting you sell bigger accounts, right? And I'm going to give you access to those deals. These are the types of things I would present to my team if I'm raising their quotas. I'm going to show them how they're going to get there, because raising a quota without a plan is just a plan to fail. I don't know if that helps you, because I'm kind of telling your leader what they should have been doing, but those are the types of questions I'd go back and ask them. Obviously be tactful and stuff and say, hey man, I want to be bought into this. If you're not, you can be honest. You can say, be honest with you. Like, I'm a little nervous about this. I'm trying to understand the thought process here, try to understand the plan. I want to be able to get behind this. Can you help me break down the math and understand how we're going to do this year? Give me some advice. That's
no disrespect to the first part of your answer. That part at the very end, Collin nailed it. That's the part. That's the question that you asked. Hey, understand the quotas went up. Help me understand how we're going to get there. Yeah. How's that? I need to tell you why and how. That's right. That's it. If a leader's not telling you why and how, the team's not going to follow. They're going to fail. Yeah. And candidly, that number's probably been shoved down the sales leader's throat, and the sales leader might not agree with it either. And you know what I would say to my team in that case? Exactly what you just said. This got shoved down my throat. Yep. And so now we're going to all put our heads together and figure out how the fuck we're going to make it happen. Yeah. And I have had that conversation with my team before. Collin's had it before. And, I think if it was me, I would want to work for a sales leader who was honest with me like that and be like, absolutely. I don't fucking know either. How are we going to get there? Let's talk about it. Rather than somebody who's like, oh yeah, you can do it easy. Just work harder. No. Scott, man, it's crazy. Like hearing these it's just crazy how many people think the strategy for leading is to just be a bullshit artist, right? Like it's so much easier to just be ridiculously transparent with your team because they can't complain about anything if you agree with them. It's like, we're in this together. Let's figure it out. I don't think it's great either, but this is the world we're living in today. Rather than me trying to paint a picture of a different world and then us just bumping heads all the time. Yeah. Well, I hope this has been helpful for everybody. I want to be respectful of Collin's time and everybody else. I think we had a good discussion. I appreciate everybody's questions. We got into some good topics. The recording will be available for anybody who wants to rewatch it or share it. I dropped the link in there a few times of the event that we did over a year ago. There's also multiple Serpent Sales podcast episodes based around this topic and the event that Collin and I did. So check those things out. Do Collin and I both a favor. If you get a chance, listen to them, watch them, share them. Let's keep this conversation going. That's the thing I think Collin and I are most keen on, is to keep this conversation going so more people have some sense of awareness and understanding, and we kind of reclaim some of the power that the powers that be have right now. I think that's what we're probably most focused on and most keen on. So I want to thank Collin Cadmus for spending some time with us. I dropped his LinkedIn profile in here a couple of times. Collin, you want to say anything? You want to steer people to some of the things you're working on real quick?
Yeah, I realized I actually didn't mention in the beginning what I am working on, but if you've been following me since I left, I'm consulting and advising, but my main focus right now has been on developing a modern prospecting initiative. I originally started calling it Modern Prospecting Playbook. It's growing into something much bigger. And the quick elevator pitch is that prospecting has turned into spam. It's turned into marketing. We are not spending the majority of our days as SDRs communicating with prospects like we did 10 years ago. And I'm ready to make a movement. I'm ready to change that. We cannot just continue to make more calls, more emails to make up for the fact that those channels just don't work the way they used to. So if you're interested in something like that, it'll be a similar type environment to this, except there'll be courses online that'll be like lectures, but then there'll be a community within it. But the idea is that it's hyper focused on the future of prospecting. We're not looking backwards. We're not talking about what's working today. We're trying to talk about what we're going to be doing over the next 10 years. So if you like building pipeline, and you are tired of making endless amounts of phone calls and spamming people, get in there, because I think it's time we make that movement. I'm tired of sales being spam, and time to make a change there. So you can go to my website, collincadmus.com. You can throw your name on the wait list, and we'll see you in there soon.
Good stuff, Collin. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thanks again, Scott. Bye, everyone. Have a great night.